No, I totally agree because I look at people like, what is his name? Amerix. I look at Kibe.
Oh my God.
And the following they have.
It's insane.
You know?
It's crazy.
And you wonder, where do we start? Because there's something their conversations are feeding on.
Yes.
There's a
These conversations is being platformed by men, for men. These are safe spaces for men. So the only people who can take up this conversation and provide the kind of positive masculinity that is needed has to be other men.
I know there are a few programs, but far in between, like Man Enough by Transform Nations, Pastor Simon Baby, and others. But as you're saying, it's not enough.
One of the things they talk about is the proliferation of podcast bros with their dangerous rhetoric. The way they say it, men need to have these conversations, and there's a gap that needs to be filled by men who can provide the kind of positive masculinity that's needed. Then Mutemi suggests the Man Enough program as one providing a kind of positive masculinity. We'll talk about the Man Enough program shortly. First of all, why do men need all these programs to be men? To figure out what it means to be a man. Like, you're a man or you're not. Why is it that men are convinced that there's a way to be a man and that they need to be taught it by someone? Why are too many of them convinced that they're not doing it well and need to be taught how to do it either by their podcast bros or church fathers? I don't get it. I have never once needed any class of the sort. Second, and more importantly, the idea that the church, a patriarchal institution anchored on the dehumanization of women, can be one of the organizations teaching men positive, healthy masculinity and other buzzwords is laughable when it is not infuriating and sad. These people sanctified and entrenched the man is the head of the home. Their whole thing is that there's such a thing as a God-ordained order and that God is the author of these gender roles where women are the lesser. These people are going to be the ones we look up to teach men another way. A positive, healthy way? Where's the sense in that? Honestly, if there's a group committed to upholding the present structure of gender relations, it's religious groups. I mean, until recently, women were not even preaching in most churches, and that remains the case in many churches. This is an institution steeped in patriarchy and the supremacy of the male. They are nothing if not one of the key roots of the problem. That's why men like the version of positive masculinity the church presents, because it does not challenge the status quo and makes sure men remain firmly at the top of the hierarchy. It doesn't require them to give up anything. Just be nicer as they wield their God-given power and authority. Miss me? With that bullshit. Plus, their commitment to this binary view of everything, especially gender? No, this insistence on seeing gender as the way God made things has inherent in it hierarchies. And it just will not work in the egalitarian society we are fighting for. The church and other religious outfits are for the most part conservative counter-revolutionary organizations that do nothing but hold back calls for freedom and liberation. With only few exceptions, like liberation theology as practiced in Latin America. Otherwise, the church and other religious groupings are the enemies of all freedom-loving people. Still on programs geared at men to promote positive masculinity, Njeri talks about how they have a man talk and a program for men against violence that's led by men.
We have a man talk.
Okay.
We do. We have a man talk. And the reason we started it is when BBC was doing a documentary, I don't know whether you ever watched a GBV documentary, the men that were in that, the Jacaranda grounds, those men were saying it is okay to beat your wife. Those are my constituents because the people that I work with, those are their husbands. And they are busy saying it's okay to beat a woman. It's okay if we do this. So I felt like part of the things I want to do is to keep on doing, we call it Men Against Violence Initiative.
We are heading to the Jacaranda grounds in Soweto. We have been invited by the Jacaranda social movement to take part in a discussion about sexual and gender-based violence. This topic is a taboo subject in the country, and most men shy away from even discussing it with their friends. We are hoping this group of men is going to open up about it.
Kuna wakati wote kupiga mwanamke inakubaliwa ama iko justified.
In an African culture, wife beating ni kama initiation ceremony. When you are newly married, lazima kule slaps ama belts so that heshima ianzie hapo sasa. Unless you do that, an African woman will not respect you.
How regularly?
Regularly? Once, at least once. You just mark the territory once. So that next time ukimwambia mimi nitakugonga anajua unagonganga.
alisema msichana ukiwa nayo kwa nyumba ama bibi lazima unaweza kuwa polite. Ajue weak point yake. Huyu mwanaume wangu yule ni mwenye hata nikimkosea hatafanya kitu. Sasa mnyanya wangu aliniambia dawa si ya kumpiga vile watu wanampiga kupiga kukufa. Dawa ni kudiscipline. Ukitaka kudiscipline mpige mchape. Wacha siku yenye kazi yangu iliisha. Bibi aliniambia unajua mimi ndio nakulisha saa hizi. Na unajua hiyo wakati mimi ndio nalipa rent bado. Sisi ni control. Kama mimi ni mmoja wa kupiga bibi.
Okay. Here's my thing though. Men know what they're doing. To imagine we're going to teach them out of it is ridiculous. Men know what they're doing. That's what you have to remind yourself at all times. Men know what they're doing. They're not confused. They're not misled. They're not ignorant. They know exactly what they're doing. They understand the power they have and they're not willing to lose it. They know what they're doing when they cheat. They know what they're doing when they're intimidating and violent. They know what they're doing when they control everything about what their women do, from what they wear to who they talk to. They know what they're doing when they refuse to contribute to housework and childcare. Men know what they're doing. They always know what they're doing and what they're gaining from it. Men will beat up their wives and never punch a male friend who hurts or disrespects them because they respect them, or at the very least understand that one act of violence is permissible to them and the other isn't. They don't need to be taught not to do it. If anything, what they are taught by society is how to do it. How to control and intimidate women. How to take advantage of women's labor. Society teaches them this nonsense moment to moment. If we focus on teaching males anything, let's make it the children, young boys, preteens. We can't justify giving up on them. But the adults, and in many cases teenage boys, we need not waste time on them. They've already tasted the deep privileges of patriarchy and are unlikely to give them up. I guess it's good that they have a program, but I think women need to focus on women and children and let men deal with men. She tells the story that I like.
And it should be a very normal conversation. And I am teaching it back in Soweto. I am talking to both boys and girls. And I'm telling them, imagine ni kitu ya kawaida. And when we started, we were only giving pads to girls. Now boys are demanding for pads to take to their mothers and their sisters. Can you imagine the difference is how we have taught them? Imagine ni kitu ya kawa. Si hata unalalanga unaamka unapata uko na wet dream, and then they giggle and then they're like, oh, okay. So if we can be in the, sorry to call it the ghetto, but it is what it is. If we can be in the ghetto and start telling boys and start making them see girls are essentially like you, then anybody can change their mind. You're allowed to change your mind. Only a fool doesn't change his mind.
They have this sexual health type program with what sounds like teenagers. She talks about teaching them about periods and stigmatizing it. They give pads to the girls, and in the past, only girls used to take them. And now boys are taking pads to give to their sisters and mothers. I think one thing such programs like Mantalk fail to acknowledge or fail to take into account is that asking men to change is asking them to give up their privilege. It's asking them to give up their control over women's bodies and labor. It's asking them to give up their high seat and consider themselves at the same level with women, which few men, if any, are willing to go for. Why, as a man, would you take that deal? Why would you give up all the patriarchal goodies? I think that's what these programs have to ask themselves. Why would a man take a lesser deal? How can you convince them that they're no better than women? How can you convince them to change how they perceive themselves and where they derive their sense of self-worth? What's in it for them?